Welcome everybody, and this is Lisa McCauley. I'm the CEO of the GTPA, and I trust that you are all safe and sound. And I thank you very much for kindly joining us for today's session, which is going to be on managing your remote workforce. Once again, I'm very delighted to be joined this week by my long-term friend and work colleague, Miss Collins Rex, who is the Director for Asia and Africa for the GTPA, but she is also an international trade expert and an expert in international business strategy. Just a couple of ground rules as normal before we start the session. The agenda will start off with a presentation on the topic. We'll then open up for sort of like a fireside chat style discussion between me and Collins, and that's where we'll also take any questions that you might have, which you can post in the chat box to me directly, and then I will present those to Collins. And then we've actually got two special announcements to make at the end today, so it's worth staying online for those. Without any further ado, I think for those that join us on a weekly basis, they seem to, you're probably getting a concept of how the flow and the rhythm works. So I'm not going to waste that much time on that today. I switch my video off during the presentation because we suffer from some quite bad bandwidth issues with our internet. So it's best if I try and reduce how much I'm using it. And just bear with us if from time to time we might have a few internet connectivity issues. I'm sure everyone can understand that this is a little bit of a problem we might all be experiencing at the moment. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Collins. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lisa, and thanks as always for the introduction. Delighted to be here. And yeah, just to reiterate what Lisa mentioned, we might run into some technical snafus as we go along, so please just bear with us. If we drop out, we'll come back. It's quite appropriate that we're talking about managing remote workforces today and mentioning technology issues in the same breath, because of course everyone is working from home and everyone is using up the bandwidth that's available, which creates all manner of issues. But let's have a look today at that all-important managing of a remote workforce. Of course, working from home is nothing new. Many of us have been doing it for many years, and many of us have exclusively been doing it for many years. The difference now to what it was, well, let's say by the end of last year, is that now it's not a case of some people working from home, it's a case of the majority of people working from home, and entire teams now are working from home, whereas in the past, you may have had an office where you had the majority of people working from that office and a handful of people working remotely, particularly if they were in different locations. But now, of course, everybody is doing it. It's by rare exception that people are actually working in an office environment and not working from their homes. First thing to take into account when you are now considering managing your workforce, as a business owner, as a business manager, managing people from their own locations rather than from your office. It's very important that you know your legal obligations. Just because your staff is working remotely, it doesn't mean that you no longer have a duty of care towards them, or indeed that any legal obligations you would normally have to your employees now falls away. You need to know what your jurisdiction's workplace and human resources law says about remote work, and you need to apply those rules. You cannot skirt around them, because if there is a problem that arises and it is found that you have not done the right thing legally, you will be in a world of pain. You need to understand your obligations regarding providing a safe workplace, for example. If in your business, in your normal office, day-to-day operations, there are certain rules in place as to what constitutes a safe workplace, if somebody is working from home, those rules need to be extended into their home office space. You also need to understand whether working from home breaches any of your employees' suburban planning regulations. It may be illegal for your employees to conduct business from their home environment. This is particularly marked in certain jurisdictions like China, where there are very specific rules that govern what you can and cannot do in residential areas. You also need to understand whether working from home has tax implications for your employees. If you have ascertained that there are implications from a tax, from a planning regulation, etc. perspective, you have a legal obligation to advise your employees accordingly so that they do not run into trouble with their own authorities. And if there is a cost involved in them conducting business from their home, particularly from a legal perspective, you have to be prepared as the employer to compensate your employees if that is necessary. You also need to have very clear work from home guidelines. And don't you just love the fact that we've got all these new acronyms that have crept into our language? WFH, work from home. You need to clearly communicate all guidelines and policies to your work from home staff. This includes, for example, the expected working hours. Do you expect your staff member to be at a desk ready to work from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon? Or is that more relaxed if they're working from home? Any discrimination policies that you have in place in your office environment need to be carried through into the workplace at home. Now, that might seem a bit silly if somebody is working in a space where they're surrounded by their own family. However, legally, you still have the same obligation to protect your employees. Any occupational health and safety regulations need to be applied to that home office. If you have a video conferencing etiquette that you apply as an employer, you have to communicate that to your staff. So you might have certain rules, for example, about how your staff must be dressed. Just lost screen for a moment. We'll just get it back again. There we go. Should be back now. So you need to have those guidelines very clearly set out. You also need to have very strict policies, and you need to communicate those policies around the way your employees access your company records, company servers, and the like. Also, rules around handling confidential information. If you didn't have a rule and something is done that is not appropriate or correct, you really don't have a leg to stand on. You also need to have a rule around disposing of documents. And a little bit later on, we'll talk around security in a bit more detail. You also need to very clearly communicate to your staff what is different from the office environment and what is the same in terms of any policies and guidelines that you might have. And it's very important to communicate those to your staff. When your staff is working from home, it is very important to set guidelines again about the way in which they function. But it's very important that you focus on goals and not activities. Remember, accomplishment trumps activity at any time. You cannot micromanage people. You cannot control every minute of every day that they spend working from home. In truth, you can't do that when they're in an office environment ever. But at home, that is more marked. Don't fret about what they're doing, rather focus on what they are achieving. So set those goals that are based on achievement, not on specific activities. Manage expectations too, and that applies equally to you as the manager of your team and to your team. It also applies to those people outside your organization, your customers, your suppliers, etc. You need to manage what they expect from people when they are not working in a 9-to-5 office situation. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Do not micromanage. Trust your team. You know who it is that works for you. You know the capabilities of your staff members. Trust your people. Provide them with the support they need to work from home, but let them get on with the job. Don't schedule constant, intrusive catch-ups. But when you do catch up with your team, make every virtual team meeting count. Be very careful of having constant catch-ups that might make your staff members think that you're actually spying on them. Leave the virtual door open. Let your employees know that they can reach out for assistance and support whenever they need it. They need to know that you're there. That doesn't mean you have to be there physically with them all the time. Be intentional by establishing clear expectations. If you clearly set out what you expect your employees to achieve, the hours they need to maintain, etc., you will find that it will be a lot easier for them to do their job and a lot easier for you to manage them. When you engage, do so genuinely. Be interested in your team members and engage with them on a real level. Understand the team members' work styles as well. Not everybody works in the same way. Some people actually just like to get on with things on their own, and that's okay. You will find that those same people would have functioned in very much the same way in an office environment. And if some of your team members worked remotely before the COVID-19 crisis, don't treat them any differently now just because more people than just the few are working from home. Your team needs the tools to succeed. Supply any equipment they need to do the job, and that includes appropriate hardware and software. If a team member was working in an office environment on a desktop and they're now working from home, you might have to provide a desktop or a laptop. You cannot expect them to have their own tools if they are employees. Of course, it's an entirely different matter if parts of your team consist of contractors, but that would have been different before this current situation. You need to make available any digital technology that your team needs to stay in contact, any tools that they need to conduct meetings and so on. And that might mean not giving them access to free Zoom. Anyone can have that. There are limitations. You might have to provide licenses for your staff to use. Ensure that your team can access all the company information that they need. So if you have company servers, if you have cloud-based services, etc., you need to make it easy and possible for your staff members to use those records. They need to be able to log into remote servers. They need to establish protocols for accessing information. And you need to make sure that they know what they need to do the right thing from a security perspective. If necessary, provide training to your staff on how to use the tools that you make available, such as video conferencing, Zoom, etc. Not everybody is comfortable conducting meetings online. You have a duty to make it so for your staff. If they're not comfortable doing it, you will need to give them the necessary training so that they can do it properly and that they have confidence in being able to conduct themselves and do their work. It's also very important that you encourage your team members to connect with one another. And that means connect with each other without you as the manager. If a remote team is to function as a cohesive unit, that team needs to interact as a unit. If people were working in an office environment, they would be able to bounce ideas off each other. They would have conversations. Some of them would be purely social. Some of them would be work-related. They need to be able to do the same thing in the virtual environment. So encourage those virtual water cooler catch-ups. And that means the catch-ups that don't include the boss. Have team members who don't work well alone collaborate on projects with colleagues, and this is where you step in. Some team members are quite happy to function on their own, and they're very efficient that way. Others need people with them to do things cohesively. You need to guide those relationships and help those groupings form. Also encourage more experienced team members to offer informal support to less experienced team members. That could be from a business perspective. You might have newer employees that can lean on older employees that have been with the business for longer. But it also means you might have employees that are comfortable and used to working from home. They can guide the ones who are not. Technology is there to engage, not just to manage. At the moment, technology is the only way we can interact with our team members and our customers. It is an absolutely essential business tool, but it is also more than just a business tool. It's a way in which we can engage with our team members on a personal level. So celebrate achievements and milestones